A ghost particle caught deep underground and a fossilized leaf cell under a microscope have almost nothing in common. Yet two science stories published over the past week share a striking approach to measuring the unseeable. In Quanta Magazine, James Dinneen follows physicists tracking elusive geoneutrinos to map the radioactive heat churning inside the Earth's mantle. Above ground, Regan E. Dunn writes in The Conversation about paleobotanists measuring ancient leaf cells to see how forest canopies reacted to extreme global warming. These remain entirely separate fields of research, but something interesting emerges when reading them side by side: a shared leap in scale. Both show how capturing a tiny, isolated fragment can suddenly bring a massive planetary system into focus. 2 kilometers beneath the surface of a Canadian mine, a technician paddles a raft across a cavern of glowing blue water. Writing last week, James Dinneen visits this subterranean laboratory where physicists are hunting for elusive particles called geoneutrinos to map the radioactive heat churning inside the Earth's mantle. Listen for the extreme lengths the team goes to just to keep the experiment clean, like taking mandatory showers simply to wash off microscopic radioactive dust.
Neutrinos from deep inside Earth provide a new picture of the mantle. Introduction. In a laboratory 2 kilometers underground, a crane lowers Matt DePatti, a detector technologist, through a hatch into a white-walled cavern filled with about 7,000 tons of ultrapure water that glows as blue as wiper fluid in the light. "Splashdown," DePatti says over a radio as he steps into an inflatable raft waiting below. Normally, the cavern is one of the darkest places on Earth, but today it is lit up for maintenance, offering us a rare chance to see inside. I peer through the hatch at DePatti as he paddles over to examine the submerged experiment. He's inspecting a house-sized detector built to catch some of the most elusive particles known to physics, neutrinos. This is the SNO plus neutrino experiment, buried deep within the Creighton mine at SNOLAB, an underground physics laboratory in Sudbury, Canada. SNO plus consists of an acrylic sphere lined with nearly 10,000 sensitive light detectors and filled with 780 tons of oily liquid scintillator, which flashes when lit up by energetic particles. The water around the device and the rock above it shield the detector from the glare of cosmic radiation, allowing the flickers of less common particle interactions to shine through. Our whole journey down has been part of the crusade to maintain absolute darkness, even beyond the visible spectrum of light. As we descended the main shaft and walked through a rocky tunnel to the lab, our bodies and clothes collected minute amounts of radioactive radon dust. Before entering the main laboratory space, we tossed our mine clothes, showered, and changed into electric blue jumpsuits and hairnets to minimize the contamination we carried in with us.
"The showers aren't for you," DePatti said as we changed. "They're for the science. Such extremes are necessary when you're trying to catch ghosts. In this case, ghosts that may help reveal the secrets of inaccessible regions deep within the Earth." Radioactive planet. Neutrinos are the most abundant of all the particles that have mass. But that mass is tiny, just a millionth the mass of an electron. With such little heft and a neutral electromagnetic charge, the particles hardly ever interact with other matter. Trillions of neutrinos, mostly those produced in the sun, pass through our bodies every second. Yet after years of hunting them with detectors such as SNO+, researchers have captured only a few 100,000 of their precious flashes. Even more elusive, so much so that after decades of searching, scientists have detected only a few hundred of them, are geoneutrinos. Geoneutrinos are produced in processes that heat the interior of the planet. This heat plays a major role in powering the flow of rocks in the mantle, which shapes everything from plate tectonics to Earth's magnetic field. It comes from two main sources: heat left over from the planet's formation and heat produced by the decay of uranium, thorium, and potassium in the rocks of the mantle and crust. Without this second source, Earth would have long since cooled off and become a tectonically dead planet. In counting geoneutrinos,
physicists can get a direct measure of Earth's vital heat-producing elements. "It's the one thing we do that focuses on the Earth," said Ryan Bayes, a particle astrophysicist at Queen's University in Ontario who works on SNO+.
Everything else we do is more focused on what we receive from other places in the universe. The first detections of geoneutrinos by an instrument in Japan called COMLAND was reported in 2005. In 2009, the Borexino detector in Italy reported catching several dozen more. In November 2025, SNO+ reported its first detection, bumping up the number of observed geoneutrinos by about 50. What makes the detections at SNO+ special is the experiment's location. These are the first geoneutrinos measured in the Western Hemisphere, offering a new perspective on Earth's radioactive interior. Major uncertainties remain in interpreting the results from these experiments, but researchers' best estimates suggest that each site is measuring a different flux. "It could be that that's the first hint that the mantle is not uniform," said Mark Chen, a particle astrophysicist at Queen's University and director of the SNO+ collaboration. Geochemists have conventionally assumed that radioactive elements are distributed evenly throughout the mantle because the flowing rock should mix everything together. But the measurements of geoneutrinos in different locations could hint that this is not the case. The regions that seem to be producing the most geoneutrinos sit roughly above continent-sized blobs of anomalously hot, dense material known as large low-shear velocity provinces, or LLSVPs, which seismologists have mapped on either side of the core. One is under Africa, the other under the Pacific Ocean. "There may be deep Earth structures in the mantle that are not understood," Chen said.
It could be that they concentrate some kinds of elements. Neutrinos could one day offer new insight into the still mysterious origin of these deep structures, and more broadly, the patterns in the mantle that underlie many aspects of the Earth system. "It really would be a way to make a chemical map of the Earth's interior," said William McDonough, a geochemist at the Chinese Academy of Sciences, who has long been a leading voice in the search for geoneutrinos. Catching geoneutrinos. The outstanding question is whether the geoneutrino measurements reveal differences between the areas of mantle below each experiment, or if the imbalance originates in the way the different experiments count their geoneutrinos. Researchers across the board say there's still so much uncertainty that it's impossible to say. If we take it at face value, we could say maybe the Western Hemisphere has a lot more radioactive material in it than the Eastern Hemisphere, McDonough said. But there are reasons to be wary of these estimates. Are the Italians right? Are the Japanese right? Are they both right? Or is something wrong? He said. The uncertainties associated with each detector's results come from the sorting process that physicists go through to identify geoneutrinos, Bayes said. They don't just show up and say, "Hi, I'm a geoneutrino." Scientists must eliminate signals from particles with too much energy, particles with the wrong measurement of a property called helicity, and particles that they expect to see flowing from nuclear reactors. They must also eliminate geoneutrinos coming from Earth's crust, with the largest contribution coming from the area within a few hundred kilometers of the detector.
When those other detections are subtracted from the total count, the geoneutrino signal from the mantle should be all that's left. In general terms, the geoneutrino flux from the mantle seems to be very high at Borexino and very low at COMLAND, though the uncertainties are great. A detailed geological interpretation of the SNO+ results is still in the works, Chen said, but so far scientists see a pretty in-between mantle below Canada. A particular challenge for SNO+ scientists is understanding the neutrinos coming from the detector's surroundings, including a basin formed 1.8 billion years ago by a giant impactor. There are lots of unknowns in this geological area, said Virginia Strati, a researcher at the University of Ferrara in Italy who helped develop a local model of radioactivity for SNOLAB. Uncertainty also comes from estimates of the total amount of radioactive material heating the mantle. The flux of geoneutrinos suggests that these elements could contribute anywhere from just a small percentage of its heat to half of it, a discrepancy equivalent to the output of tens of thousands of nuclear power plants. Both sources of uncertainty make it even more difficult to detect any differences between the chemical makeup of particular sections of the mantle. The difference in the geoneutrino flux expected from various distributions of radioactive elements is very small and is hidden in these uncertainties, Strati said.
future flux. The detection at SNO+ comes at an exciting moment for geoneutrino research. Juno, another huge neutrino experiment currently collecting data in China, is expected to report its first geoneutrino flux later this year, adding a fourth and notably richer view.
With more than 20,000 tons of scintillator, the experiment, buried under a mountain outside the city of Guangzhou, is so large that it is expected to detect more geoneutrinos in its first year than the combined output of COMLAND, Borexino, and SNO+ over decades. Clearer estimates of the geoneutrino flux at each experiment could come from more detailed geological data, as well as further geoneutrino counts at each site. However, McDonough says the best thing would be to build a neutrino detector at the bottom of the ocean. It's an idea McDonough has championed for decades. Such a detector would be far from continental rocks, which are rich in radioactive elements. Oceanic crust is also thinner and more uniform. Crust-related uncertainties go down so much that you are in mantle-only territory, he said. The idea of an ocean bottom detector, estimated to cost hundreds of millions of dollars, has seen little take-up from government funders to date. But McDonough is hoping he can make something happen in China, which has given the green light to other big geoscience projects. It's very possible, he said. Until then, physicists will keep paddling around for answers deep underground.
James Dinneen leaves you standing 2 kilometers underground, watching a massive detector wait for the tiniest particles in the universe to flash in a tank of ultrapure water. It's a striking image of scale, catching a subatomic ghost to map the molten rock moving miles below the surface. Up next, Regan E. Dunn takes that exact same assumption into a completely different field. Where Dinneen looks down into the Earth's mantle, Dunn looks back 56 million years into the past. She wants to know what ancient forest canopies looked like when global temperature spiked. You can't photograph a forest that disappeared before humans existed. But notice how Dunn solves the problem. Just like the physicists tracking microscopic flashes of light to see the whole mantle, she uses the microscopic shape of fossilized leaf cells to reconstruct an entire prehistoric forest. If a leaf cell grew in the shade, it stretched out. From that tiny cellular shape, Dunn can measure exactly how thick the canopy was when the world burned. Read alongside Dinneen, Dunn's method reveals a surprising shared rule. To map the largest, most inaccessible systems on the planet, you have to look at the smallest possible fragments.
56 million years ago, Earth's forests reached a tipping point. They had grown dense, lush canopies at the start of one of Earth's most intense episodes of greenhouse warming. But those canopies began to thin. As global temperatures rose by as much as 11 degrees Fahrenheit, 6 degrees Celsius, heat and drought put stress on the forests, killing large numbers of trees. Forest canopies opened, exposing the ground to more sunlight and altering the movement of water through the landscape. In southern Wyoming, ferns briefly flourished where relatives of elms, walnuts, dawn redwood, and avocado trees once thrived. Then palms and other warmth-loving plants spread northward. In a new study in the journal Science, my colleagues and I show how those Wyoming forests lost 60% of their canopy during this period, known as the Paleocene-Eocene Thermal Maximum, or PETM, and how it took them well over 100,000 years to recover. The PETM was Earth's closest natural analog to the warming the world is experiencing today, although humans are releasing carbon dioxide roughly 10 times faster than the planet's natural processes did then. Understanding what happened to the forests may help humanity recognize similar thresholds before the planet crosses them again. Reading the forest from fossil leaves. As paleobotanists, my colleagues and I use plant fossils to identify which species once lived in a place. We wanted to answer a harder question. What did the forest itself look like, and how did it change? The structure of a forest, and importantly its canopy, controls the amount of light that reaches the forest floor, the temperature, water habitat, and amount of carbon the forest can store, making it one of the clearest indicators of ecosystem function. But how do you measure the density of a forest that disappeared 56 million years ago? Ecologists measure canopy density using what's known as leaf area index. Dense forests with multiple layers of leaves intercepting sunlight have a high leaf area index score, while open forests that allow more light to reach the forest floor have a lower score. Because the forest canopy influences shade, temperature, water loss, and photosynthesis, the index provides a powerful measure of forest function. Our clues to the density of forest canopies millions of years ago came from microscopic plant cuticles, the thin, waxy outer skin of leaves that can survive for millions of years in organic-rich sediments. You can still see the shapes of epidermal cells in these fossil leaf fragments, and that's important. The cell shape reflects the amount of sunlight the leaf received while growing. Leaves that grow in shade develop longer, more elongated cells as they stretch out seeking sunlight. Those exposed to more sun develop shorter, rounder ones. We turned that relationship into a tool for reconstructing ancient forests. To calibrate it, we collected soils from forests across Central and South America, spanning a wide range of canopy densities. Each handful of soil contains cuticles shed by many different plants across the canopy, reflecting the structure of the forest as a whole. The fossil record preserves this same fragmented leaf litter. Comparing the shapes of thousands of epidermal cells with the leaf area index we measured revealed a remarkably strong relationship. The more elongated the cells, the denser the forest canopy above them. That relationship allowed us to reconstruct the structure of Wyoming's forests millions of years ago and show how they changed over time.
When forests reach their limits, one of the most surprising discoveries was that the forests did not enter the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum in decline. Just before rapid warming began, the forest canopies reached their greatest density in hundreds of thousands of years, likely reflecting favorable growing conditions as atmospheric carbon dioxide began to increase. A leading theory for the source of that carbon dioxide involves volcanic eruptions. That flourishing forest did not last, however. As temperatures climbed, heat and drought overwhelmed the benefits of higher carbon dioxide levels. The canopy rapidly thinned as trees died, and it remained much thinner for over 100,000 years. The forests functioned very differently in this diminished state, and that affected the surrounding environment. Ancient soils gave way to coarser river deposits, suggesting that the loss of canopy altered how water and sediment moved through the basin. The changing climate changed the forest, and the forest changed the landscape. Lessons for today. This sequence carries an important lesson for today. Higher carbon dioxide levels, like the world is experiencing now, can stimulate plant growth, but only while temperatures and water remain within the limits that trees can tolerate. Beyond those limits, heat, drought, insects, pathogens, and wildfire can overwhelm any fertilization effect that would boost growth. Around the world, many forests are already showing signs of diminishing as temperatures rise, in addition to deforestation for timber, crops, and rangeland that further reduce their resilience. Forests recovered, but it took over 100,000 years. The story of the ancient forests of 56 million years ago does not end with collapse.
Over time, the increased breaking down of rocks in the warmer climate, known as weathering, gradually pulled carbon from the air, storing it in marine sediments. That allowed the climate to cool and water to become more available. Forest canopies recovered, eventually becoming even denser than before the warming began. As the forests expanded, they likely restored their ability to stabilize soils, regulate the water cycle, and draw carbon from the atmosphere, helping reduce the greenhouse effect and boost the planet's long-term recovery. Our study shows that carbon dioxide emissions have pushed forests beyond their physiological limits before, triggering changes that ripple from vegetation to rivers and across entire landscapes. It also shows that forests are remarkably resilient when given time to recover. But what counts as time is far longer than a human lifespan. It requires thousands of generations. Today, human-caused carbon emissions and warming are unfolding vastly faster than during the PETM. The fossil record reminds us that forests can recover, but only if humanity avoids pushing them beyond thresholds from which recovery takes tens of thousands of years.
A subatomic flash in a dark underground tank, or a microscopic ridge on a fossilized leaf, ends up holding the shape of an entire planet. The scale flips. To see the whole globe, it takes zooming in until everything else disappears. What lingers is how the largest, most violent forces on Earth are read almost entirely through its smallest pieces. If the clearest picture of a changing world comes from things too small to see with the naked eye, what massive shifts are happening right now, completely undetected, just waiting for the right lens to find them?